Welcome back, everyone. This is Tucker. Let's talk weather. It's heating up again. Let me tell you how hot I expect things to get this week. And as temperatures rise, so do storm chances, the next wave of severe threats ahead. Happy Easter, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your Easter Sunday and have had a nice weekend. This is what my radars looked like today. And while we do have severe weather ongoing in the central part of the U.S., I'm going to get you ready for everything coming in the next week, especially Tuesday through Thursday. So let's get right into it. I'm taking you straight to Tuesday, the only day with a severe weather outlook right now, but I'll explain why you should expect more in the coming days. I'm just giving you a sneak peek at this. And what you can see is a level 2 risk shaded in yellow across much of the Texas Panhandle. We have this threat extending as far north as Kansas and a separate threat that extends into the upper Midwest as well. This will be our first chance for some severe weather as we begin the week, and it is primarily going to be a large hail threat out here in the Panhandle and sort of a mix, a lower threat for damaging wind and large hail a bit farther north. But like I said, this is just the start, and I'm going to show you some other days that aren't in risk areas yet that you should be prepared for and that I'm forecasting very closely. By the way, if you don't follow already, be sure to do so because I routinely will give you forecasts before you hear about them anywhere else. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. I'll answer all of you there. So here's a look at some of the machine learning data. This is from Colorado State University. I believe it does a good job at highlighting some threats that may not be picked out quite yet. And from what I've forecasted so far, this is your Tuesday threat. Whenever you get that red bullseye, that's when you know there is actually a decent chance for some severe weather. And this is going to be a large hail threat primarily, as we just spoke about. And what you can see is that threat centered in the Texas Panhandle, but it broadens out into Oklahoma, Kansas as well. Maybe a very low tornado threat, but this is primarily for hail. That said, this is going to broaden out a bit more as we head into Wednesday and Thursday. You can see many of the same areas included under that severe weather risk. Thursday is the day where it may broaden out the most. Both days should feature a slightly higher tornado threat, but it will still be on the low to medium side. Large hail will still be a concern, and damaging wind may become a more substantial concern as we may see some, we call them MCSs, lines of storms develop as these begin to grow up scale. So that's why I believe this threat broadens. There may be more for reach as those lines develop. But that's going to be your Tuesday through Thursday to watch here. I'm also going to keep an eye on Friday. It looks like more of a general risk. Could extend into the southeast as well. Just something to keep an eye on. But let me show you some of the scientific data I'm looking at so you can understand why this threat may be more broad and why it may be a little bit more confined, just depending on how things shake out. If this isn't your first time watching, you know we love to talk about the jet. It's such an important piece of our weather. But the jet stream here, as you can see, beginning the new week, it's not going to be super strong. And I know you're seeing a lot of color out here, but if you notice, it's pretty flat also. And when the jet stream's flat, that means there's less energy being injected into it. So while there is going to be some wind in the upper Midwest, enough that we do have that low severe weather threat out here on Tuesday, it's not going to be substantial. The biggest player that we need to watch for severe weather is the subtropical piece here, and it's going to try to get into the Texas area, but you'll notice it doesn't really do a very good job. You're not seeing a lot of bright colors showing up here, and because the jet isn't very strong, we don't have any significant severe weather risks, but that's why we need to pay extra close attention because we're looking to pick out the details, things that may be being missed right now. So what I'm looking at here specifically is just a subtle amount of energy that may be getting into the southeast, especially as we head into Thursday and Friday. And you may have noticed that over Texas in the days prior. That's something that I'm noticing now to look for a more subtle severe weather piece. Now, once we get into the following week, that's where we'll need to keep an eye on this incoming wave, and that may be more substantial heading into the 27th, 28th, and onwards. I'll also show you, though, if we take a look at some of the instability, this is energy from things like heat and humidity, there is going to be a lot of it. And here we are heading into Tuesday. You can see this does spread far enough north that we do have that small severe weather threat in the upper Midwest. But there is going to be a lot of instability down here by Texas, and that's really going to help to fuel the large hail threat and the potential for some damaging wind out there too. Moving this forward, you're going to see that next week, as temperatures really get warm, and we'll talk about the numbers in a minute, you can see there's a very broad area of potential energy for severe storms, especially as we head into Thursday. I mean, there's a lot out there for storms to work with, but you'll also notice on Friday too, I mentioned the southeast, with a jet subtly involved, there will certainly be easily enough energy for some storms, potentially severe ones, to pop up. And so we'll be watching that, I believe, Friday into the southeast. I'd be surprised if we don't have actually a level 1 risk at least. And that's a ways out, but keep an eye on it with me. Then as we head into Saturday and Sunday, you do see it takes a bit of a break, but the following week, I expect severe weather is going to ramp back up again, and I will especially be watching places from Kansas to Missouri down towards the Gulf Coast, Texas, Louisiana. That is going to be an interesting player in the following week here. And as for the timing of storms, well, here's our system moving out on Monday, and you're noticing there is at least some activity out here across portions of the southeast into the mid-Atlantic. There's just not a ton of energy, so while there may be a very slight severe weather risk, I'm really not that worried about this one. Once it's out, we're looking at that next wave of energy, those storms that may be popping up, and you'll notice, especially down towards Texas and up into that area that's highlighted in the upper Midwest, there are some storms that pop up, but they'll be more isolated. Doesn't mean they're going to be not severe, just means there may not be quite as many, and sometimes those are the better storms if you like to chase. In fact, I may be chasing this upcoming week, so stay tuned for that. That could be fun. But regardless, here we are heading into Wednesday, still seeing those storms popping up around Texas. These will mainly be afternoon and evening storms, by the way, with some activity that may be ongoing after dark, but not quite as much. Here we are on Thursday. This may be the most active day in terms of storms. You can see plenty of them out here, Texas, Oklahoma. Some stuff could be popping up out in the southeast, may get a little bit in the upper Midwest again. Not convinced that stuff in the southeast or upper Midwest will be severe, but there may be some activity. Then heading into Friday, you'll see again that activity does shift farther east. There's our look at storms afternoon and evening in those areas that we were talking about before. Not surprised, our weather model, the European model here, showing that. I'll show you what happens as we get into the weekend. Could be some rain in the northeast quite a bit as that system eventually moves out. And then into next week, you can see more activity showing up in the central U.S. Again, something we will need to watch beginning Sunday, Monday, everything out here. So there's your timing, at least for this week, mainly afternoon and evening. As far as temperatures go, you're going to see those orange colors take over a good chunk of the U.S. here as we get into the middle of the week. That indicates a ridge of warm air, generally quieter conditions and generally warmer too. And really a ridge is just when the atmosphere gets warm, it sort of bubbles up, and that's what we're measuring here. And it's the bubble that forms in the lowest 15,000 feet. So it tells us there's a very warm air mass is what we're getting at. And you can see for a good chunk of the United States, that ridge will be in place, especially towards the back half of this week. The 24th, the 25th, 26th, and honestly, even into the very end of the month, that ridge is still very apparent. There may be a little bit of a bubble, a cooler bubble out here farther west. That's our next potential for severe weather we were talking about. Could keep things a tad shaken up. But let me show you how this translates to what you're going to feel at the ground. And we'll start here with our temperature anomalies, telling us how warm it is relative to average or cold. Orange colors indicating temperatures warmer, blues, temperatures colder. And we're heading through Monday into Tuesday now. You're seeing a good mix of oranges and blues, but ultimately we're going to end up seeing more of those oranges, more of those warmer than average colors showing up, especially towards the northeast this week. While you are seeing some blue colors, especially popping up in the afternoon, like here in Texas, the air mass is still very warm. That's just the model showing storms, which are cooling the air. But as a whole, you can see Great Lakes region, very warm there on Wednesday. Thursday, we're still looking at warmth very broadly. Thursday and Friday, still very warm, especially across the eastern U.S. here. There will be some cooling on the weekend as our next front comes in. You're going to see those blue colors show up here heading into Saturday. But as a whole, we're still talking about a warm U.S., and we will recover very quickly after that front moves through. And you can expect it to stay above average into next week as well. And as for those actual temperatures, anywhere you're seeing those yellows, those are 60s. You got oranges, those are 70s. The red colors are 80s, and those brown colors are 90s. This is this upcoming week. This is Monday, in fact, your high temperatures, and you can see across a good chunk of the United States here. I mean, that's a huge portion of the U.S. We're looking at least 60s and a lot of 80s out there as well. So for April, that's pretty warm, especially across those northern states. We may see 60s, even the potential to reach 70 into Canada here. This is your Wednesday high temperature, one of the warmest days that we'll see. And we continue to warm heading into Thursday. 70s should be present into Canada, easily up the East Coast. It'll be in the 90s across the southern U.S., comfortably cool out here in the western U.S. and perhaps across the northern plains here on Thursday as well. That's as our front comes in. You can see it cooling things off towards Friday, but we're still very warm out there. And even on the weekend, though, temperatures do get drawn back a bit. That's widespread 60s in the north, easily 80s and some 90s farther south. Cool on the west coast to start the weekend off. It'll stay cool into the weekend, but the eastern U.S., as I mentioned, stays very warm and recovers, continuing to warm, in fact, as we get into next week as well. Those are going to be some widespread 70s and 80s for more than half of the next 10 days, it appears. And so we'll wrap things up there, but remember to drop your questions in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. I love to interact with you guys, so if you just want to talk weather, feel free to banter in the comments, and I'll make sure I see you here next time. And check back. I may be on the road storm chasing this week. We'll see on that one, but if I am, you don't want to miss it. So I'll see you back here, guys, next time.